Great. Hi, everyone. Today, we will be discussing more on the talent acquisitions, right? But this time we have an interesting subject to discuss. We all discuss about, talent retention, talent management, talent acquisitions, human capacity and competency and whatnot, right? But this time we will be, exploring both the sides, which is more of like a corporate world, but at the same time on the blue collar guys who focuses more on who help us on day-to-day basis, right? And that's something which is very exciting subject that Sudev has brought. So today my guest is Sudev, who has brought more than a couple of decades of experience, worked with Motorola, Intel, United Health Group, Unisys, brings on board tremendous amount of experience, right? So I would like to invite Sudev. Welcome, Sudev. Thank you for being part of our podcast.
Thank you so much, Madhu, and thanks for inviting me to this podcast. Hello all to all the listeners there. I'm pretty excited to be on the podcast.
Great, Sudev. So why don't you just have a quick, introduction about you before we begin on, learning more how you have, helped organizations shape up and utilize them the right talent.
Sure. Thanks, Madhu. I started off my career way back in '97, and it's been in HR. Predominantly, I was pretty passionate about recruiting and hence delved into it much earlier in my career. And over the past couple of decades, have been doing recruiting, HR, both in India, APAC, and a couple of countries in Europe and in the US. I happened to be very lucky at a point in time when the tech sector was ramping up. I was predominantly focused on tech HR and hiring. However, I kind of moved on. I think 2012, I decided to start my entrepreneurial journey with an organization called Orange Antelopes, ramped it up, grew it, got insights as to how the world works on the other side. Also, it was a validation of kind of my skills, whether I am able to fish on my own or not, because the corporate taught me a lot in terms of recruiting and HR. So that was interesting. And then, of course, continued that for quite some time. Then, of course, just before the pandemic hit, started heading Unisys. I was the head of talent acquisition, went back to a corporate for about a couple of years. But my passion was to kind of move into the non-tech sector and see what's going on, because I believe there was a significant opportunity waiting there. Having come from a small town, which is Bhopal in Madhya Pradesh, my objective was to help others like me who were setting out, making their careers or trying to struggle for a job, enabling them. And that is how we started off Swayam, which is for frontline workers, right from sales to customer service to delivery, logistics, a whole host of industries that we cover. So 2021 is when we formed Swayam, and we started off the journey with Swayam, which has been very interesting and gratifying at this stage.
Fantastic. I'm quite excited, right? The way you have thought and the way you are driving and giving a shape to the talent acquisitions. But to begin with, right? I mean, I may have some funny question for you. I mean,
sure.
One is that, right? While you are helping others to recruit the right talent, right? I mean, when you started, you must have thought through that. Okay, I also want the right talent, right? I mean, so it is like one is that recruiting one for yourself to ensure that you succeed. I mean,
Correct.
You fairly have learned, right, as you said, moving from corporate world to starting your own journey.
True.
Right? Talent plays an important role. If you have one right guy, right, that guy can help you scale like anything. That is one way of looking at it, right?
Absolutely.
But the question is more on the other side, which is like which you can combine and help us understand your approach. So one is that today the market is quite competitive, right? Wherein AI playing a very, very important role in identifying the right talents, and that what sort of nowadays solutions exist in the market, right? So how do you see this, or how what would be a recommendation for organizations to identify or adopt the new strategies to acquire talents which can help them in driving things right?
And I think that's a very interesting question, and I think has multiple perspectives to it. But let me start by kind of looking at the landscape today.
Yeah.
So if we were to look at the talent landscape today, Gen Zs, as we talk about it, is going to be one of the largest generations to live in India. There are about 377 million as of today. And today, in every four people in the workforce, one is a Gen Z person. Now, I think what that does is it creates this huge shift which is taking place and about to take place at a very fast pace and a huge context. Now, when you're kind of looking at your organization and saying, hey, what is it that I'm kind of building? So you kind of need experience, people who are experienced, people who are kind of your top performers who hit it out of the park. You need people who are average performers too, by the way. I think they kind of contribute to steady the ship a lot. They contribute, they have, you build aspirations for them to kind of grow into that roles. So you need a diverse workforce, and they are all generations. But I think when we come to kind of a context of skill, productivity, who is the best out of the, I think while the approach has to be, take the best, take the highest context. I think the more and more as we kind of move forward, it's going to be a very inclusive workforce, which is that it's not necessary top 10% are your top 10 performers. The context of performers and the context of talent and how we look at it is going to shift significantly. And that's because of the behavior shift that is taking place in terms of people and outlook and a whole host of that. So I think it will be more inclusive. At the same time, you will need your guys who hit out of the park. I mean, so it'll be kind of very diverse now than it has ever been. People coming from small towns, people coming from larger metro cities, gender diversity, people who got more exposure vis-a-vis people who are learning capability. So there is, I think the way I would look at it forward, I think the ability to learn, unlearn is going to be one which is very, very critical.
Right.
The focus around identifying such people is going to be very critical. And the way I look at it, quite a few of them are going to come from smaller towns who kind of have the hunger to grow, who have the risk, the ability to take risk and try out new things, because it's become very competitive, like you said, both for organizations as for people competing for jobs. And so you've got to be standing out from the crowd. And so the question is, how do you stand out, and how do you kind of enable yourself, or how do organizations look at people who completely stand out, and I think that's going to be critical. The creativity is going to be something which is going to be important.
Yeah, absolutely right, Sudev, right? I mean, nowadays, if you say, right, I think one of my observation always, when you hire a talent, right, I think more than a skill, what you always look for is an attitude. Right. Sometimes you may find the candidate or your team member do not have the skill that you're looking out for. I mean, not exactly, but they have the right attitude. So they are like a go-getter. They'll figure out themselves, right? So leading to that point, right? I mean, once you onboard a candidate, right? What do you think? What is that one area, right, or one expertise that organization should be investing to ensure that the candidate from day one becomes more productive, right? And when I say productive, needless to say, right, contributing in the direction of organization's growth. So how do you see this?
I think two parts to it. So when I and I personally, when I even hired for Swayam, I was looking for people who understood the mission or the vision of Swayam, right? That's it's easier said, it's very cliched, but I think it's important. The reason I say that is, when I hired some of them, they didn't have the skill, but they had the hunger. They wanted to learn the skill. And at the same time, it resonated. This whole thing resonated with them. One of the things that I realized, and I realize now, that most of them were Gen Zs. So for Gen Zs, the cause is an important thing. What is the organization doing? What is the larger organization driving towards? Is it environment friendly? Does it have a social impact? So there are a lot of things that kind of play. I think for us to be successful, so I took that risk of saying, okay, let me teach the skills. I'm okay with teaching the skills. I want people who have the attitude and resonate. The mission of enabling others to get jobs resonates with them. But I think when you're kind of talking about in the corporate world or kind of the organizations we kind of look at, I think it is important when you know what you want. I think the first mistakes we make is, every job description is templated. But what is it that you as a manager are looking for? Does it capture it? And that starts the genesis of mismatch. That you're kind of looking for something, but the person doesn't bring it, but it's a compromise, and all of that leads to the context. So I think one of the most important things is the ability to learn and unlearn, I would say, from a perspective with AI and the way AI is changing. Secondly, fungibility of skills, that I can do not just one, I should be able to do at least 2 or 3 things. So if I am in HR, I should be able to recruit, figure out basics around compensation, draft policies, and things like that. And I think more and more organizations will start looking at this fungibility as workforces get more leaner as we kind of progress and leveraging AI. I think that awareness of tech is again going to be one of the important ones, even in the non-tech roles, as to how aware are you with things like AI or things like that. So I would say the learning and the unlearning, the fungibility of skills, tech awareness, if I may say so. And then, of course, one of the important ones is, does the person resonate with the organization or not? Because now I find frontline workers ask me that question: what does the company do? So whether we are dealing with smaller companies, larger companies, it's very interesting to see how youngsters now want to know what the company does before just saying, okay, I'm up for the job. So I think those are 3 or 4 things I would kind of definitely look at.
I think everyone wants to be part of something big, right?
Yes.
They want to feel associated, and as you rightly mentioned, it's more of a cause that they want to be part of, right? When they go back, they want to feel that what, I'm in the right direction.
True.
Right,
True.
my career is in the right direction. So, see, in your case, right, Swayam is a very interesting subject and platform that you built, right, for looking out for people, for B2C organizations to B2B organizations, right? So, in such cases, right, I mean, how what one area that you think that onboarding experience matters here, right? So that impacts. So people may decide, if the onboarding experience is great, what, I think this makes sense. I think the organization is great. So what approach you adopt here to ensure that the onboarding experience is great? Because I mean, I think the platform that you guys have built is all about ensuring that the right candidate is hired and joined back, right? So if you could kind of explain more on that. And I think there's one very interesting metrics that you talked about, and I would love to learn more from you, which is intent to work. So how do you see this onboarding experience?
Great. I think the onboarding experience is critical. I mean, and I'll just backtrack a bit. So what we are doing in Swayam is basically targeting a segment, which is basically, if you really ask me, Gen Zs, which is very visually oriented. So attention spans are low. They are interested only in visual, immersive visual experience. Those are kind of things that you see. And so when there are so many companies wanting to hire, all in small towns, we're doing a lot of work in rural India, small towns, and the big companies want to get there. The question is, how do you figure out who is the person? How do this? Because I hear this content always that, hey, that's great, but I don't know whether he wants to work or not. So what Swayam does is 4 critical aspects. One is this whole context of job shorts, we call it. These are 35-second videos that we deliver on multiple social media platforms and short videos. The reason for that is that short video platforms have much better reach. So Swayam has this very unique model of going out, getting you candidates, at the same time looking at our own community of 1 million users where we kind of target this. The other thing that we do very well is this whole context of hyperlocal. So now everybody wants to find out people in that location. It's not like, okay, XYZ coming from XYZ location. So I think that's something that we do very well. The third is, because that segment is less text, more visual, more audio. So there is this whole context of assessment, which kind of becomes very easy. And fourthly, which is very important, is the whole curation process. No other platform does it the way we do it, is the curation of every applicant that comes through the platform. Now, what we've discovered over a period of time is that there is something called as intent to work. I want to work in this job. I want to work for that company. Now, traditionally, it's very tough to assess it. You typically ask that question, so where do you see yourself, or why this company, etc. But in the frontline workers, it has to be done slightly differently. And the way we do it is, there are 3 or 4 parameters, right? So if they create a video, that's the gold standard, right? That I'm interested in you and I'm pitching to you. So I've taken the effort. Number 2 is when we curate these profiles, there is an immediate response from people who create videos. who want to send their resume. So that's the second level. The third level is when you pick up the phone and speak to them and kind of understand or whatever. That clearly is the final kind of a thing that, it's clearly there is an intent to work and the person is interested in the opportunity. Now, this is very different from what we traditionally used to do. Pick up the phone and say, hey, are you interested? And et cetera, et cetera. Now, this plays into when they get hired. So, if you kind of look at some of the data, it's very interesting. We are from resumes to hires, or so to say, the application shortlist. It's about 35%, which is very good the way I look at it. But what that does is it sets up a candidate with an organization, and the organization to say that, hey, this is somebody who's interested in me and is available. So that equation itself gets on a positive start. Now the question is that once you have that, what do you do next, right? I think that is a very critical part, because these people can change jobs like in a jiffy. So if the experience is good, you give the offer letter, explain them the job. And I am encouraging, in fact, Swayam does a lot of this with enabling videos. So what is your role? What is the job? If it is described in a video, and I keep talking about one of the QSR restaurants, where they had documented this in a video, that you will come in, you will fry the samosas, you'll use this, you'll take the order. And they had this 35, 40 seconds video talking about the job and somebody who's doing the job. And the moment people relate to that on a video of 40 seconds, 50 seconds, it's a different experience altogether. So they know what they are coming into. The organization knows that they're aware. And then it's a question of how do you onboard them vis-a-vis, additional training, documentation, this thing. But that is the biggest area where candidates disconnect when we are talking about frontline workers. If they are not talked to, they will move away. If they do not have a great experience, they will move away. Because what we have to remember is they come from diverse backgrounds. It's not a white collar situation that we're talking about. So you've got to look at your engagement strategy. You've got to look at your skilling kind of a context at that point in time, or training or learning perspective, and a clear context of what would the first week look like for them.
That makes sense. I think, and you have I think you highlighted a very interesting point here, right? I mean, creating a video that explains the job. Right. So that makes the person comfortable, right? So it's more of like a, gaining the confidence that, I think, it's doable. I know how to do it, right? And if you go there, I think, it's just a matter of getting to know in first day and second day, I'll be more, confident of delivering it. So I think it's a very interesting point. Maybe I'll little diverge into a subject of more of corporate, right? So how do you see, right? I mean, when you hire some technical guy to sales, marketing, finance, and all of this, right? Different functions in the corporate world. I mean, how the same methods can be applied there. So let's take an example of like a B2B company, right? So they have like a product people, right? Or they may have like a services people who are focused more on offering the services to the customer, to sales and marketing. More or less, they know the kind of work they need to get into. So, I mean, how do you think that this can further be handled and uplift the experience of a candidate who feels, what, this makes sense, I'll go ahead and join them?
Right. I think the transition has to be around if we to correlate and say, hey, how can we transition that into something like this? Has to be around, at the end of the day, we are all human. We are hard-coded for stories. So if somebody who's doing the job is articulating, hey, this is what it is, here are what the challenges are, but it's a great organization. It's very interesting how, when we kind of get a job, it is important for us to get social ratification or other people telling you, that's a great company, right? So that is needed, but that may not necessarily, you may not be able to do it in a context, but you can do it in a way of a story. Somebody who's kind of articulating not about the organization or how great is the organization, but somebody who's doing your job or who's doing that role to articulate, hey, here are the challenges, here are the opportunities, here's what the job is. While I know, but I don't know the culture, the context. And if somebody articulates them, and this is the problem with text JDs, it does not necessarily come out the way you want it to. And organizations believe, okay, one JD de diya hai, so it is kind of done. The connection is very important. And the more and more as we kind of move forward with Gen Zs taking over more roles, it'll be interesting to see how they are so embedded in that story or that context. If it does not resonate, Like we were talking the other day, there are social platforms. People check out, I have an offer from here, I have an offer from here. What does everybody think on this network? That is a validation of the offer of the company of this thing. Now, the question is, how can you create it within this? Nobody right now is kind of looking at it, and people do it in different ways, where the head of HR speaks about how great the company is, this thing. What he is looking at is, my peer or somebody who's doing the job, can he articulate what is it to be in that company? And I think organizations need to move in there. And these are not massive videos or massive spends. It can be a 35-second video shot over phone. And I've seen this organizations doing a lot. But that with a job description really can swing a top talent in your favor, just because you're candid, open, and there's a story around how somebody can be this thing. So those are kind of important things if I look at correlations of how you can kind of get there. The other thing is, which in my space we are doing is, there are organizations who have figured it out. They know what their onboarding journey is like, what their first 7 days would look like. They have videos, they have this thing. I think at a stage when somebody signs up with you, if somebody's saying like, yeah, I'm going to join, I think to enforce that, if you start doing that at the stage when he said yes, I think the only downside is that, okay, what if he sees all that and goes? The chances are less that he will go. The chances are that he will stick on, just because of the fact that you've made it easier for him. Here's the guys who you need to get in touch with your laptop, etc., etc. That is the biggest struggle in any of the organizations. The logistics, when you kind of enter, and then you're like, oh shucks, where did I come to the right page? Or that 15-page documents that you have to sign. But I think it's deeper than that. If it can be evolved in something like, hey, don't worry, we've got you, we've got your back. Here is how we'll ease you out. This is what it'll look like. Here's a video, the manager talking to it. And I think async videos are a great way of engaging people with what they are in for and what they are into. And I think this will only grow, because Gen Z is all about immersive video experiences. If you give them that, they're on. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts in terms of how we could look at it in a corporate kind of a context.
That's it. So one is that, it's more of an experience nowadays, not gone are the days, which is more of documentation, right? Which is more, linked to your policies and processes, and then you going there. And I mean, the perspective was very different, right? In the sense, if you switch back a couple of decades, right? It's more of like, the employers reflecting in a direction that, how big they are. And candidates believing, I'm getting an opportunity to be part of it. But now it's reverse completely. Right? It's more of like, am I getting the right experience? Then the company is good. And, I happened to speak to one candidate, and the person had a great offer. I don't know to name the giant in India, but the person he was very blunt in saying, I don't want to be part of those, 10,000, 50,000 people company, right? And the guy was a fresher. Right. And he said, first of all, I'll be lost. And secondly, if I go there, I don't know. And so they generally, what do they do, as you rightly mentioned, they speak to people within their network, right? And they go to internet, and they are very, very, very proactive, right? I mean, if you remember when we started our journey, right, we would be thinking, and if you have an offer, we'll not just think, oh, you know what, this makes sense, I'm getting my role and whatnot, I will just go ahead and join. These guys will proactively take steps, reach out to someone in the company, talk to them. So that guy told me, what, Madhu, I was talking to my people, people in my network, and they told me, if you go there 6 months, you'll have no idea that what you will end up doing.
Right.
So I don't want to be part of such company when the company is even clueless. They are just hiring and not sure to offer. So, the kind of response I got, I felt like, people have matured a lot, right? Probably we might have thought about this 10 years later of we starting a journey, but these guys are thinking now only, right? So that's one perspective that you bring on board. But see, there's another flip to it. Just imagine, and that's the next point that I wanted to discuss. Question, right?
Sure.
So one of the challenges that nowadays organization faces here is that, let's take an example, they hire a candidate, right? The candidate is great, and I'm sure, right, I'd also like to learn more from you, from the the platform that you guys have built, how you are handling it. But the point here is that the organization rolls out the offer. but the
Yeah.
candidate may end up giving interviews during the notice period. And
Correct.
as you know, right, I mean, if someone says, you know what, I can join you in 10 days, the person literally can get hike like anything.
Correct. Correct.
Right? And they
Correct.
know this.
Correct.
So now candidates have also figured out, but the organization's problem is just imagine the cost that is going very, very high to hire the right candidate. And secondly,
True.
it is very disappointing, right? I mean, you are waiting for things to happen when the candidate joins and you plan out things well in advance.
True.
So it is like
True.
it hits HR process, it hits somewhere, to the
True.
organizations like a product, delivery or services side of it, right? When they are planning things and how they are
Sure.
going to handle it. So how do you
Yeah.
see these situations can be handled or how you guys handle it in your case?
So, Madhu, that's a very challenging question. Let me try to answer it. It has multiple dimensions to it, but let's look at it from a perspective. In our world, the longevity we talk about is 6 months is like really long. 1 year is like wow, the person has stayed. But I think it starts, and more and more in my experience and talking to my customers, what I found out is it starts with that context of intention to work, right? So
Yeah.
there is an intention to work with you, right? If that quotient is higher, ability to engage is easier. If that quotient is lower, then your engagement needs to be really high. Now, the two things that you brought about just now is the context of I will check out socially whether this is an acceptable company or not. I will also want to check out, is this the right place for me? Yeah, there are 50,000 people, as you rightly mentioned. But, and that's what I'm saying, if you break it down, an organization has to be broken down to the team
Yeah.
that person is going to join. Now, if that team does a particular context and has a particular story, has war stories, is shared with that individual, the intention only increases. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
these guys have gone the extra mile. Everybody is looking at it. Today, it is not an employer's market. It's shifting very fast to a job seekers market. And the expectations of the job seekers are very different than what it used to be, when you and I got into this. So the question is, are you going to just do the traditional? And all of us have worked. I mean, so we know. No, you give an offer and then you kind of leave it, wait for the guy to join. I remember way back when I was joining one of the companies, my head of HR made sure that I was engaged, and I was like trying to figure out what. So he used to send me these handwritten notes, and with some articles, and it would courier, and it would all the 4 weeks before I joined that company, it used to hit me, and I'm like, oh shoot! Now even if I have to say no, this is not a great way to, it's not
Exactly.
going to be easy for me. So I think what we need to figure out is what are those engagement tools. Because otherwise, yes, attrition can happen within the 3 months, a dropout can happen before the person joins, or it continues for longer. In our case, what we do is when we are kind of engaged with candidates do call us saying that, hey, I've joined this, but I was told accommodation, the accommodation is bare bone, or I was promised food, but the food that I'm getting, I have to cook it myself. Now, that is an engagement level that we have. Probably the organization should have had that. But because he's not confident in articulating it to them, he's a first timer to the job market, doesn't know how to kind of deal with it. So there is an outlet, which is us. But I think what has to happen is there have to be these social groups within an organization, the support group. Okay, there are 50 people joining, right? Or a month before, 20 people have joined. Can there be a community of those 20 who've joined, who can talk to these guys and say, hey, it's okay, even if you're a first timer, if you're a fresher, it's a large organization, but there are support systems for you, for us, onboarding those. And I think those are the kind of things that we'll have to rethink the whole thing, because the traditional work, the traditional things are not working, and it will not, because we are going with an assumption for a generation which thinks very differently than us.
Yeah.
So that has to evolve and that has to change.
No, absolutely right. But I think I also like to learn one more thing from you. You said, when you say intent of work or intention of work, that quotient, how do you define that quotient in the sense, when do you decide that, oh, you know what, when they fill the form, right? I mean, they would definitely tell you, yeah, I'm interested because they're looking out for a job, they're looking out for a change. The first time it's always like, yeah, I'm quite excited to be part of this organization, right?
Sure.
But how do you
Sure.
quantify it, in a way that's proves this makes sense? I think the candidate is serious about these organizations.
Right. So at this stage, we've not quantified it, but we look at it in stages. So The first stage is that you, let's say when candidates apply, right? So first put up their hand saying I'm interested, right? Then the next stage is, would you create a video? And so a lot of guys will drop out then, right? Which clearly shows me that okay, you're not very serious about it. So when then somebody makes a video, right? Then if he's making a video and submission, that's a critical transition, saying that okay, they're really serious about this role. Then you kind of validate some of their experiences, talk to them. That then those two really kind of articulate, saying that okay, now this is ready to go from a intention to work. But I think what has to happen even from our side is to be able to quantify that. If I do a weighted average and I tell you, hey, the scope, the intention to work here is 30% or 40% or 100%, that would make more sense to organizations. But that's something which is work in progress. It involves behaviors. It involves the unseens or the non-quantifiable issues. It could be as simple as, the work I got is 140 kilometers from here. I don't want to go while I've got this thing. So I think how do you kind of, and that's where the curation thing comes in. When you kind of curate, when you kind of ask people the tough question that the role is here, role is there, that becomes very critical. And now, of course, while there's a human element to curation, but we are moving more from a perspective to AI bots in terms of asking those questions. And I think that when you kind of attach a weighted average to it, that becomes a critical context in terms of saying that, hey, this is it. However, that's as good as the next step, which is onboarding and engagement. Because I personally believe that if that is broken at any part, then you kind of have this challenge around that.
I think, very rightly pointed out, right? I'm sure you must be, measuring in terms of what matters most to them when they look out for a change. And if that is figured out, I think, that can also give a little bit of a confidence, right? Back to you and back to the employer that this makes sense, so investing because corporate, it's like they go through I'm sure, right? Throughout your career, you must have seen it, right? And that is now happening at very senior level as well.
True.
So one part is good that, the economy of India is growing, but that also brings in another aspect that now you have more opportunity to figure out.
Correct.
Right. That is where, so I think you would see that a lot of such steps are being involved now to very seriously qualifying the candidate, right? So what we talked more on the lines of, kind of figuring out strategies to identify the right talents, figuring out, what skill can help in terms of impacting the productivity, figuring out, the process of ensuring that we have the right candidate. But once you onboard, right, starting from experience of ensuring that the onboarding experience is uplifted, how do you ensure that, the candidate is retained, right? And retention, again, has seen at, various level differently, right? And again, it depends on organization to organization, the kind of experience they bring on board. But ideally, you would find once the candidate is onboarded, the person would be there in corporate world at least for a year. But then to ensure that the candidate is actually, and it is more of, I am referring more of the retention or retention strategy for more of non-regrettable attrition.
Right.
So basically, if you're not regretting about it, doesn't matter.
Correct.
But if it is a regrettable, then you really want to figure out that, you have the right retention strategy. So how do you see it and how do you guys, kind of handling it?
So, and we've had these conversations, some of them with our customers as to, how can you guys look at it? And my take is there are two parts to it. One is this whole context of like you said, like the regrettable attrition or churn. And then there is that, I'm okay with it. Now, if you look at, and I want to look at not just one, this thing fits all, I think you have to break it up. So if you're a tech company and you're kind of looking at, okay, here are my 4 product architects, right? Now, vis-a-vis, here are my 6 testing guys, okay, at a stage. Now the question is, you've got to have a strategy, which is, if the product is made, right, and is articulated and it's kind of functioning well and it's more on a sustenance maintenance mode, the question would be, do you want to retain these guys, right? And retention at what cost? Okay. Vis-a-vis these testing guys who now play a critical role, retention at what cost? Because it is sustenance, maintenance, and things like that. I have always looked at, or the way I would, in fact, going forward, look at it is break it down into segments of that. So the way I look at it, attrition is not bad. It's the context that you have around it. So if you have built-in ecosystems within it, you have one tech lead or a lead, which you are kind of okay, knowledge transfer happening. So then you focus on that lead. What do I need to do to retain him? But if and that can change. In our world, it is like, this guy is critical, but yeah, it's 3 years okay, or 1 year okay, or 6 months okay. Even if he goes, it's okay. I've got my core guys in.
Yeah.
I think it will have to be more built around that. And you talked about experiential. So everybody experiences the organization differently. And in the past, organizations have tried to play a lot of emphasis on that. Everybody experiences it like wow, and everybody is wow and things like that. That reality of the situation doesn't happen. And now as we move forward, it'll only get further segmented. So if my experience is great and I am growing, and it checks tick box for me, then I'm going to stay. But that is important for organizations to figure out what drives me vis-a-vis what drives somebody else. For somebody else, in my world, 500 rupees is more important than for someone else who's like, I'm entering the market, I need to pick up a skill, and I'm okay with what they do because it is teaching me a new skill. If I'm not able to make the money today, 1 year down the line, I'll make a lot of money. So I think that customization or that experience is now has to be differentiated, and what you want to do vis-a-vis what, because otherwise trying to do this, retain this thing is a pretty expensive proposition. It will get more expensive. So it has to be segmented in what your priorities are, hence what talent you need and what is critical for you today vis-a-vis it can change tomorrow. And that is the transient nature of how I think as we kind of move forward, the business will play out. But it is a challenge. I don't have one answer saying that, let's do this and it works, because now everybody is looking at a personalized experience. So my experience is important to me. It may not be important to the guy sitting next to me. He is interested in money. I'm interested in learning. So how do organizations identify that? And how does it cater into a larger context? And I think those are important ones.
No, I think absolutely, Sudev. I think that makes sense. So the reason is, as you rightly mentioned, it's a mix of kind of a different generation now. Like someone who has 15 years of experience has a different mindset. Someone who has 2 years of experience has a different mindset. We are also finding that, the skills, now you won't look at years of experience. I think that's what I keep saying, right? It's not about years of experience that you've worked. It's all about what you've learned within that, your tenure, right? So you would find someone having 3 years experience is equally good as 10 years, right?
Absolutely.
So, I think people are now looking out for more of skill. That's what I have seen, right? And they don't mind paying them handsomely.
True.
Right. And ensuring that they have a lot of energy within them. They are ready to take risk, ready to explore. And probably, I think one area that I've seen, right, organizations investing more into, this area when they give them a platform to explore themselves. As you rightly mentioned, personalized experience. Otherwise have you ever seen, right, when we started a career, like people dancing during Diwali time, and those videos are getting published. I happen to imagine myself dancing somewhere during Diwali. Right?
But that's true also. It's the social context has changed. And as an organization, you need to recognize that. And I think a lot of organizations right now are challenged with this whole thing of Gen Z, because they've not figured it out. So, Gen Zs are this, Gen Zs are not this thing, not that thing. But my take is get down to what they are looking for. Get down to they are as good, more smarter, more focused, but they need a cause, purpose. And it's more important than ever before. I mean, if you're looking at those smart kids with amazing skills, 3 years, they need a purpose. And if the purpose is defined, I think it's a different level of engagement.
Yeah, in fact, I happen to ask this question, right? And I wanted to dig deep. It's okay. We should have fun while we work, right? And, organizations should offer that platform. But one of the very, very interesting aspect that one of the HR leaders brought to me, I think a few years back, and they said, why this practice have started, because now you would find in metropolitan city, right? You would find people coming from different places.
True.
Now
True.
you have these festivals coming in, right?
True.
People like to go back, but
True.
you will find 10-15% of the population going back, but you need force to ensure
Right.
that you continue to run, right?
Right.
How do you offer that experience so that they feel, what, I am not left out,
Correct.
right? I
Correct.
don't feel left out. I mean, I am here, I'm part of it. I have other people who are enjoying this occasion with me, and that is where, HR has taken that initiative to ensure that they
True.
feel more, kind of
True.
personalized way of enjoying this along with the company, right? And that is another
True.
strategy of retention. But they said, what, they feel, this makes sense. I'll be
True.
here, I'm enjoying. They take the video, they send that video back to their families, and they feel,
True.
what, even they feel happy. The company is good. So that is
True.
another way of not only brand building, but ensuring that they give, they offer a platform when people enjoy a lot. So
True.
that's a great perspective that they brought.
And I totally agree. As I've been saying, it's different strokes for different folks. And it is important today. I mean, while we want to say, okay, and I understand from an organization's perspective of saying, this is the policy, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we'll have to get away from that. What it'll have to happen is, if I am delivering what I am in the context of what the purpose is and what you want me to do, then I would need my leeway. And all great companies have done it. This, whether you look at Google or any of those guys, they started off by giving flexibility, and to the context that they said, okay, food also free, and if you want to sleep here, that's also, you can sleep. But at that point in time, it made sense for people who were doing it. Maybe today it doesn't. And we've got to recognize it, that was a generation which is totally okay with it. This generation is not. They want to go back home. They want to work around where their homes are. So those are kind of evolutions which are taking place right now. But I think the more you accept this diversity of purpose, context, experience, and build on it, the more productive or the more better outcomes you would have. And that's been our experience in some of this. When we kind of look at frontline workers, everybody doesn't want to be painted in the same thing. Somebody wants something different. That's the remarkable thing that I experience on a day in, day out basis, that the differences are really the differences. And if you appreciate them, then you have a great team.
All right, so I think that's an interesting conversation we had, right? And as you rightly pointed out, I think the attention which in at least in India, which organizations are kind of, or the place that is getting is tier 2 and tier 3 city.
Correct.
A lot of talents, hidden talents.
Correct.
They want to be around the same place. They don't want to move around. The hybrid model is really helping them. It's just a matter of figuring out that one kind of a thing that helps you identify the right talent and ensure that the person is happy, you are happy, you get the right things balanced out and done.
Exactly.
Right? So very interesting discussion, Sudev. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure people would learn from the conversation and can may like to apply. So one of the things that I like to share with my HR here is that the onboarding experience of having that video, right? And if that can be created, yeah, I'm sure it's and I'll be excited to hear more from the candidate once they join us. That how what is their experience? What is it they have to say? Right. So on this note, thank you so much, Sudev, for your time. It's lovely talking to you, and we'll stay in touch.
Great. Thank you, Madhu, for having me here. Thank you so much. All the best.